Hey everyone, this is Arabella back for another episode of In My Musical Opinion. Today I'm joined by Meghan Purdue, and I met Meghan on a piano course that we took together. So we're both music lovers, but I texted Meg to come on the podcast because she also has a lot of experience in the digital learning sphere, which I felt like was such a hot topic in the music industry, music world, especially for music studios today. And I was so interested to hear what you had to say, your expertise on it. So without further ado, Meg, will you just tell us a little bit about yourself, maybe your connection to music and digital learning?
I play piano and I'm a digital learning. I started my career coming up in at MIT, working on like massive open online courses on edX. And I was the digital learning scientist for the School of Humanities, Arts, and Social Sciences. So I was making and actually I still work there part-time, so I still do this. Making online courses for humanities, arts, and social sciences is like a little different than maybe the MIT courses you're used to thinking about, which are like math and science and engineering. So a little more creative and a little more challenging to represent in a digital learning space. So I'm used to thinking about how to do difficult things online and trying to teach people. And I actually did make a music course, our music course series on like global music, which was fun. And we actually developed a tool. I worked with, oh, now I'm going to blank on his name, but the guy who created Guitar Hero. And we created a game that was sort of based on the Guitar Hero concept, where you would use your keyboard to learn to play different instruments, like a gamelan from Bali, and different like learn to keep different beats and stuff. So that was fun nut to crack, very challenging, which we could talk about later.
That's so cool. I didn't know that.
Yeah, but now my full-time gig is at Fidelity, working. It's still in the online learning space. I'd always really wanted to play piano. My grandmother was an opera singer and a pianist, and my grandfather was also a pianist. But I never learned growing up, and I never learned to read music. So I just like had this, it was like on my bucket list my whole life, that I wanted to do this. And then one time we threw a Christmas party where we wanted people to play piano and sing carols. And I bought this like $200 piano on Amazon. It only had like 60 keys. It wasn't even a full keyboard. And then I was like, okay, well, now it's in my apartment, so I'm going to learn how to play it. So I actually designed a whole curriculum for myself, which is like a theory I had about learning music, just like as someone who works in the learning space. And I taught myself for the first like 3 years. And then I felt like I had reached the limit on what I could learn by myself online. So then I joined the music studio where I met Arabella.
I didn't even know all that. That's so cool. So I have to say, my intro to digital learning, besides from taking courses myself, I designed a learning platform or similar to you, like a curriculum for our teacher training. And it it was not what I wanted it to be, is what I would say. It was a big learning curve. And I thought it'd be great. My whole thing was like, I presented this theory to the teachers. I was like, we're going to call it the flip studio model. And like, I had all these big aspirations for it. And the team came to me and was like, this isn't really it. I think we should just like talk and have a discussion and it would be much more effective. And my heart broke because I had spent so much time on developing this. And I was like, ooh, I have a lot of learning to do. That was my learning from that experience. I have a lot of learning to do. So I guess that brings me to the question of, obviously you think this is possible to do in more of a, I don't know the right word for it, but art space, liberal arts, musical arts. It can be done with something that isn't as maybe black and white as math, but how do you think about it if it's not as concrete?
Yeah. And like, I think At least for something like piano, or learning to read music, like those are very they're skills that you learn. Like
Mm,
there is kind of less art just learning like to read a score. Um
mm,
or kind of like just the muscle memory of like learning to play. So like the way I approached it, like there's this concept called cognitive load where like if you like if you're trying to do too many things with your brain at once, it kind of just like shuts down like your Zoom screen. If you're like on your Zoom and you're like doing a bunch of other apps on your computer and it all just kind of stops and like Zoom shuts down, like your brain kind of does the same process if you're trying to do too much at the same time. So I was like, when I was really intentional in my learning, I was like, I want to divide all of the pieces of learning to play piano into specific skills and focus on them one by one. So first I just like learned to play like with my fingers. Like I learned where all the keys were. And I did this with like YouTube videos, like synesthesia YouTube videos, like where it's just like the keys are like there's like colors that like stream up from the keys and you just follow along. Like you can just put the YouTube video on like 10% speed and just like you can sort of figure out like here's a C, here's a D, like here's how they sound, here's how I play them. I got to the point where I didn't have to look at my fingers anymore. I just knew where the keys were. Then I'm like, okay, I'm ready to learn to read music. Then I can like just focus on that. So I'm not learning the keys and to read music at the same time. Then you could kind of challenge, like you could take on a little bit harder projects that are a little more interesting. Whereas like if you're trying, I don't know. For me, like trying to do both at the same time was just very overwhelming. And I felt like I had to play really boring music that I didn't find fun.
So, do you think then that sort of platform is better suited to more concrete skills, even if it's in the more grand scheme of learning an art form?
Yeah, I think so. And I think like there's a lot of like apps that, will listen to you play and they will like light up like I mean that's a good way to learn to read music. That's how I did. There's a lot of apps out there. They'll even give you like free trials. It just is like a score like C D E, and it lights up as you play it or it
Mm,
won't move to the next note until you get the previous one right. It's just that kind of like that sort of e-mentorship. It's like very basic, but have it's like just kind of having a teacher like with you to sit as you like learn the basics of just how to knock out like how to play music, like how to read the score in real time. And it's really just like the process of wiring your neurons. Like you just have to like connect those neural pathways so that you can do it faster. And that's how I thought of it. I was like, I'm gonna practice every single day because I am in the practice of just rewiring my brain. So, like, I want there to be fresh neural pathways being laid down every single day, like for just reading music or like just learning where the keys are. So then later, when I could get through that sort of learning curve, it was a little easier to take on bigger projects that were more interesting because you kind of had that foundation laid. And like I feel
sure.
like the e-learning stuff was really good for that kind of boring foundation.
So, in a place like MIT or Fidelity, do you see it more so as they're using it as a stepping stone to get to a different thing? Like maybe this is an intro course and then they're going into a community-based learning, or do you see it as like a one and done training and then it's independent from any learning they're doing face to face?
I mean, at MIT, certainly they're doing it the way I just described as this like, it's just the act of practicing and
Okay.
having immediate feedback to see if you got something right or wrong.
Mm,
That is like the real value. Especially, I didn't tend to do this kind of work, but my colleagues did in math and physics, and science, where they're like, they design tons of P sets into this e-learning space where you're like doing little parts of it and it's just like, did you get the answer right or wrong? Like it's just that sort of immediate feedback immediately to telling you like, okay, now try again. Just in that kind of tedious work of laying those neural pathways until you don't have to think about that stuff anymore. It just becomes like rote memory.
yeah.
We have a a skill that just needs a lot of, a lot of sweat and repetition to master, but more that we want to get this education, we want to get these courses out to a broad audience that is not physically here, and like
Hmm.
can't afford to take MIT classes. So it's like it's more about access than it is necessarily that
Sure.
it's just a great material for e-learning.
This episode is sponsored by ABS. Together, we are redefining what it means to be a musical community. Rather than a single central studio, our presence is woven into the fabric of our city. You'll find us in boutique practice rooms strategically placed at the heart of the action from Rock City, Alston to across from the Symphony in Back Bay. We gather in local pubs, breweries, at local open mics, channeling our resources into getting singers out of the practice room and onto stages in the greater Boston area. That makes a lot of sense. And, from what you said, it made me think like technology is still really binary. Like it's sort of still zeros and ones, even when you're sort of dressing it up to look really nice. And so that makes a lot of sense to me. But we're just seeing such a surge of especially studios going online to like Udemy or Coursera. And I think a lot of studio owners and musicians are feeling like it's a good way to sell a product and get their name out there. But it begs the question, I think, of how to put something out that's worth the user using. So, there's a lot of access, but I think people reach a point, especially on these platforms, and they're great. But for instance, Udemy is a lot of videos, and then you're not having that practice element in it. So, do you think the workaround to that is sort of having your own platform, or where do you start?
Yeah, I think for learning music, the real value is having that kind of teacher on your shoulder, like the the app or the tool is listening to
Hmm.
you play and is giving you immediate feedback, like you played this note wrong. Or it's like a timer, like you can play along with them and you can sort of control the speed. So it's like you can watch someone play, you can play along. They're playing at 50% speed. Now we can move up to 75% speed. That kind of just like asynchronous control where you're just knocking out that repetitive practice.
Hmm.
But I don't know. I think it's great that a lot of this stuff doesn't lend itself to be online.
Sure.
Like I did a lot of this work online originally because I'm kind of cheap and I don't really like to be told what to do. So I didn't really feel like as an adult like working with a music teacher to learn the basics was like going to work for me. It's just like a teacher telling you like practice this boring song and then be mad at me if I didn't practice it or something. I wanted a little bit more freedom and like to set my own path. But I did like run out of things I could teach myself by myself. So like then I had to seek out community and like learn with other people and like play for other people, learn in person. And that's where you're learning more about like style and like mood and like how like you can play with other people and how that sounds and how that feels. And I think like
Hmm.
it's wonderful to do that with other people.
It's a modality, I think. Like anything else, it's a tool, and um, I think I always go back to it's not the tool, it's how you use it. And I
Mhm.
think we're still learning how to use this. It feels relatively new to me, even though it's Udemy, things like that have been around, but it's coming to the forefront, I think, and that's a new thing.
Mhm. Yeah. And it'll be interesting to see if any of these music apps like get smarter, if they start to incorporate AI or anything. I haven't really seen a lot of that yet in the apps that I think like Flow Key is one. There's a lot of different music apps where they have like a wide body of music that they can kind of teach you. But I haven't seen a lot of AI components in there yet. But it'd be interesting to see what they come up with.
Yeah, that would be interesting. And I bet there's a price tag component of like who's building them, and then the the technology you want seems still expensive. Like it's an accessible thing. Like you were saying, it's great that they're putting it out because it allows universal access for the user, but then to build, it doesn't feel as universal yet because AI is out there, but it's expensive to be
Mm-hmm.
able to utilize it and utilize it well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure.
Do you think that there's a revenue component of like the companies and the schools you're working at um, have capital to invest in these products because their focus is on that education and delivering a standard of education? Do you think that this is something that more independent schools or musicians should be looking into, or should they be looking at different paths?
I think it's hard to say because I think people come up with really cool ideas. Like if you see a need that needs to be filled, like I think like your campfire app, it's like you have an idea of something like you want to do, you want to be able to do this thing and you can't do it. And like you're like, we could make this happen. There's always a value for like seeing a problem that could be solved that you're excited to solve and you have like a unique perspective on. As far as like just kind of approaching it from the ground up, like it's just something you generally wanted to get involved in, I feel like it would be tough. Like there's a lot of competition out there that has been around for a while. I don't know if there's like one app like Duolingo for language, is like kind of dominated the like the phone app language learning space. I don't think there's like an equivalent of that for guitar and piano and maybe voice. But there's a lot of sort of second tier ones. There's
Mm.
probably like 10 that are like pretty advanced and they offer like different kinds of products. Um, so yeah, I don't know. I think it would be tough to compete with them, but I think if you had like a really specific need, and you had a perspective on it, like definitely like there's always there's always room for innovation.
For sure. And that's how I started looking into this. I was running teacher trainings, and I mean, everyone, and I understand it, but everyone had their camera off. There wasn't a lot of discussion. And I felt like I was kind of talking. Everyone's been lectured at. It's no fun. It's no fun to be the lecturer in that situation. And it's no fun to be the learner in that situation. And so I started looking at Articulate and designing this course. And then honestly, we ran out of capital and it wasn't developed to the point I wanted it to be. And so I was like, well, we need another solution. So I opened up a Google Classroom file just because Google was something we had already invested in as a company. Like we had a business drive. And one of our team meetings, I just brought up they have like a template for Google Classroom websites. And I was like, we're all going to take a page and we're going to all just put a topic on it that we're interested in. And we're going to build it out and present it to each other. And it kind of ended up being more of an e-learning platform than the e-learning platform itself, I think, because we were using it in the way that I had originally wanted Articulate to be, but I needed sort of an entry point that I didn't know existed or how to get there.
hmm That articulate Udemy style of like where it's like videos and sort of exercises, it's like it's a lot of work to produce that well. And yeah, it's just really hard to make it interactive. It's not well suited for that for interaction or community.
The piece of advice I would leave to the listeners is I had to, quote, fail at it to find a different solution. Um, and that was another takeaway, I think, for me in the like e-learning sphere is because it's sort of developing, it's okay to try more than one avenue and then find the thing that sticks.
hmm And like to break things, like most of the job of being an e-learning designer is breaking technology to work the way you want. Like So many of these things, they're designed for some specific use that no one ever uses that way. So it's just kind of finding the limits of like, how can I, set this up in such a way, or like trick the system, or like force it to do what I want it to do. And that's like a lot of the fun of building things.
This episode is sponsored by Piano for the Vocalist. Piano for the Vocalist is your ultimate resource for unlocking the skills to self-accompany with confidence. This largely free program is focused on teaching singers to use collaborative piano techniques for vocal performance rather than traditional piano skills, empowering you to accompany yourself with ease. How did you get into that? Was it more of an education background, or was it a digital background? Because there's a lot of things at play there.
No, yeah, I got into this work through research. I was like a research manager, managing human research in sub-Saharan Africa. So this faculty member I was working with at MIT hired me to manage a bunch of projects he was working on in South Africa and Tanzania. And then we were also making an online course about democracy in sub-Saharan Africa. So like while I was like traveling around, hiring interviewers or like meeting with faculty, with different universities, I was also interviewing people for this MOOC, the Massive Open Online course, and taking B-roll. I'd be like out in the streets, like just like filming with my iPhone, like B-roll for the course. So it was like a lot of fun putting that together. And then I felt like by the end of actually launching that course, it was like I had a lot more fun doing that than I did managing the research. And I felt like I cared about it a lot more. So then it was just kind of an opportunity to move into doing that full time, and then just stayed in it. So I actually didn't have any education or digital learning background. Like when I started, I just had the opportunity to work on a project, and then I just sort of morphed into it. But then, I took a lot of like video editing and animation courses and like education courses. And then I got my doctorate in education. So I got the training after I got the job, which I think is pretty common.
Yeah, I think that happens more often than we like to admit, or that we think. I've talked about on the podcast too, how I thought I was going to go into marketing in the corporate world. And even though I had been singing my whole life, that wasn't what I thought my education was going to be in, or the journey I was going to take. But life is life, and it takes you on the journey it's going to take you on. And I now, as of this weekend, have a master's in speech pathology and concentrating in voice. So you never know where your education is going to go and your job search is going to go.
Yeah, I think it's just being open to like what's interesting, what opportunities there are. I've always approached my job as like, you're told to do these tasks, or like you're responsible for these things, but then people will like give you projects or opportunities, and it's just like, just try them, what's the harm?
I'm learning so much new things. I thought I was going to come into this conversation with, I kind of knew your background and this is going to be great because we'll talk about X, Y, and Z. I had no idea you started in research and that it was sort of a secondary journey. So that's so cool.
Yeah. Yeah. And now, I'm doing it full-time at Fidelity and part-time at MIT.
A lot of e-learning.
A lot of e-learning. Actually, I do like it. It's a little like making a documentary sometimes. It's like a lot of video, a lot of editing, a lot of like thinking about narrative storytelling, but like in a learning specific space. So
yeah, I was looking through before this, just general your LinkedIn, to see what the correct lingo was for describing your job and what you do. And I think I saw learning experience architect or user architect, and I was like, that's such a great description. I loved it. I wish I had such a cool title like that, but
Yeah. I
Um,
think my last title was scientist and this title is architect. And I think it's really funny because I was like neither a scientist and I'm also not an architect.
well, you are in some ways, just not the typical way. But do you work with like computer scientists or digital design, like more of the artwork for this, or what is the interaction between the overall picture and who you would work with?
Yeah, I think like if anyone is interested in getting into the digital learning space, you're kind of expected to be a jack of all trades. So
Okay.
I would say to be successful, you have to be the kind of person that just like wants to learn everything and is excited because you're gonna do it all. Like you're gonna do the video and the graphic design, and you're gonna do the data analysis, and you're gonna be like trying to write the Python to get the thing to work. I don't know if this is like 100% true of all digital learning designers, but everyone I've ever worked with, this has been the case. And I think it tends to be the case if you're sort of like particularly ambitious and want to like sort of climb up the ladder, just sort of take on like all these different hats. But often it's just because there's just nobody else is like available to help. This is like limited resources. But certainly, like, we do usually work with like true technologists who are like building the platforms, like the actual the data engineers who are building these things at different institutions. But they tend to keep them like pretty removed from everybody else. I've noticed like they like to have a firewall between engineering and like the people who use their tools just to I think protect them from having like lots of people be like, "Hey, could you build me this like crazy thing that I thought of today?" So, if you want to build some crazy thing you thought of today, you kind of got to do it yourself or like hire somebody and try to figure it out.
Yeah, it doesn't sound so different than music, honestly, being a musician or being any kind of artist or user experience architect, which I would argue that musicians are in some ways too. So, totally relatable.
Oh yeah, and just thinking about all the different, you're thinking about the audience, but you're also thinking about the build and you're thinking about the product and how it looks and also like the artistry of it. Like, is this something I'm proud of? Is this something that is nice? Is it interesting to me? Is it doing something new?
I was just thinking through everything you were saying there, and it just makes me feel like there's so much more to learn that I haven't even started to delve into. But I always like to bring our episodes full circle here and ask if there was one thing to leave the listener with, one practical piece of advice or something to think about, what would that be for you?
I would say like the advice like that I took of teaching myself piano with like apps and YouTube and things online. It's like you can do it, you can rewire your brain to learn this skill. Like it is very possible. It's just committing to do it like every day. It's just the practice of rewiring your neurons. And as adults, our brains are less elastic than they are as kids. So it's just going to take a little bit more like sweat. But it's not like you have to spend a ton of time doing this. Like you can just if you could just commit to doing 5 minutes a day, or 5 to 30 minutes a day, you're going to get really far, especially if you're taking advantage of these tools that can give you immediate feedback and you can kind of play. And then I would just say, like, go easy on yourself and, learn music that's exciting, that you like to play, and that you would be excited to play for somebody else.
Awesome. I think that's great advice. And thank you so much for coming on today and diving into some of these questions and teaching us a little bit more about what e-learning is and how to approach it, if you should approach it, when you should approach it. So I really appreciate you taking the time.
Yeah, this is so fun.